Today's episode, I wanted to tell you about just a couple of interesting, funny things that happen. Lots of times we say things on the air that we don't really realize sometimes we mean to say, and sometimes it just kind of comes out in the flow of the guy you're working with or the girl you're working with, and just things get said. And sometimes you mean them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they're just off the cuff and they're funny. And also, I'm going to play a clip for you from Arsenio Hall when he got his first talk show, because it was a really bizarre incident at the announcement news conference to announce that he was in it. Before I want to tell you, I'll tell you a couple other things. I was working in Fresno at 96 FM, and which was the kind of was FM, and we did a sort of a bizarre type funny story at the end of every newscast. And I was there with John Lee Walker, who was the disc jockey and also program director, and I was the news guy. And we did the newscast, and the last story was about a professor who in San Diego, one of the San Diego universities, and he got busted. And he got busted for sleeping with one of his female students. And it turned out not to just be one, it turned out to be more than one over a period of time, which is obviously inappropriate. And he got busted for it. And John asked me, he said, well, why did he do this? I mean, knowing that, the consequences. And I said, well, his explanation was he was under duress. And John said, under duress? And I said, yeah, but the big question is, under whose duress? And John just broke up. And it was one of those things, when you're disc jockeying along with the news guy and you're having fun and, you're kind of pushing those envelopes, it was a funny moment. And it was one that I always remember. And it just happens to be one of those quips. Whether you find it funny or not is up to you, but it was funny at the time. Another time, funerals, especially for Hollywood stars, can be really interesting. I covered Ricky Nelson's funeral. I covered Donna Reed's funeral. Those are some of the early funerals I covered. Very touching moments. I remember Ricky Nelson's daughter talking about how her dad loved ice cream, and when she was talking about him, and the boys as well talking. And Donna Reed's funeral, Jane Platt and I, who was working for ABC at the time, we were the only radio people there covering the funeral in Beverly Hills. And Jimmy Stewart was there, and we had interviewed Jimmy Stewart coming in and a lot of other stars. And so they put us in the kitchen because they really didn't have a media room or something where we could plug into with speakers. So we couldn't really get the sound. But overhead in the kitchen, and it was just Jane and I, that's all it was, just me and her. And overhead, they had these speakers piped into the kitchen of what was going on in the main sanctuary. And Jane and I looked at each other and said, okay. And we held our microphones right up to the speakers, and we got pretty good sound, and as we were sitting there, and Jane looked at me, she goes, this kitchen, there was coffee being made and that kind of stuff for afterwards. And she goes, it smells like Donna Reed's kitchen would smell in the Donna Reed show. And we both kind of had that moment. It was, yeah, that's true. It does, doesn't it? But the other funeral that was really kind of funny, and it should have been humorous, because Ted Baxter was the character that Ted Knight played in the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was one of the funniest, longest running TV comedy shows in history. It broke a lot of ground and had a lot of great stars, some classic moments. And if you watch that show, one of the all-time classic moments was the Chuckles the Clown episode. And Chuckles the Clown was killed on television when an elephant, Chuckles was dressed as a peanut, and an elephant came up behind him at the circus, thought he was a peanut, grabbed him with his trunk and squeezed him and killed him. And as gross as that sounds, it's the funniest show you've ever want to see. And the thing about it was that Chuckles the Clown had a saying: a little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants. And we kind of waited during the funeral for that to come out because it was just this classic moment. But one of the probably the top 5 classic moments of TV comedy ever. It was just that good. And if you remember it, if you watched it at the end and through the whole thing, Mary Tyler Moore as Mary Richards just everybody would make jokes about how Chuckles was killed. And because that's the way a newsroom works. And Mary was just appalled throughout the whole thing. And she couldn't laugh, and she thought it was just disgusting. And at the end, she had to give part of the eulogy at the funeral, and she couldn't do it because she couldn't stop laughing. It just hit her at that moment that Chuckles the clown was killed because he was dressed as a giant peanut and was killed by an elephant that grabbed him and squeezed him. You know, so with that in mind, we covered the funeral, and all the time we're waiting for this moment. It's got to happen. Somebody's got to say it. And Gavin MacLeod was doing a play in New York, and he couldn't be there at the funeral. We had interviewed Mary Tyler Moore and some of the others who were at the funeral, and other stars that came along. And but Gavin sent a letter, and the show's producer was given most of the eulogy, and he got this letter, and he said, you know, we got a letter from Gavin MacLeod who can't be here, and so I want to read this letter to you. And he reads this letter from Gavin MacLeod, and it closes out, because Ted, you are a little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants. And the audience broke up, and it was just that classic moment that you hope happens at your own funeral. Okay, you'll never know it there, but you hope something like that happens. And I've done a number of eulogies and know about classic moments in funerals. Hopefully that I've told some of that, but it was just fun. It was just, you know, it made the story and it made the day, and a lot of people walked away knowing that was what they would remember. Now the Arsenio Hall thing was really interesting, and in the fact that he kind of got into it with a reporter in the crowd. Basically, they were announcing that Arsenio, this is when, you know, Fox was coming on the scene and Paramount, and they were competing with late night talk shows. And Arsenio got the chance to be, it wasn't the first, but one of the first Black artists to get his own late night talk show to compete with Johnny Carson and all the rest. And so we had this big event, you know, it was a party and a news conference at the same time. They made all the introductions, and his publicist and maybe it was his agent, I'm not sure. But Arsenio was there, and one of the reporters by the name of Michael St. John didn't like something that Arsenio Hall had said, and he challenged him on it. And Arsenio got a little hacked off, and he was kind of playing with him at first. Then he realized this guy who was I forget what magazine he worked for, but he was really upset, and Arsenio didn't like what he had to say, and he was challenging him, and he challenged Arsenio to the point that Arsenio shot back, and it wasn't his best shining moment, but there it is, and I'll play that for you now. It runs about a minute.
I still want to show, yes. I want to be, you upset about that?
Of course.
You are?
Go ahead, Arsenio.
No. I'd rather talk to you.
My name is Michael St. John.
All right, Michael St. John. You seem to be bitter, man.
No, I just, you seem to be taking my time about a sister. I don't appreciate it.
You know? I don't appreciate your hair, but but you know.
Okay.
I'm going to whip his ass.
I know.
No, relax, man. Go read Jet and chill.
Oh, I often do.
You know, just relax. You really have a problem?
No, no problem whatsoever, but I think comedians are persons who get the opportunity to...
Are you a comedian?
No.
Okay, well, shut up. Because you don't understand comedy. All you understand is journalism. I don't tell you how to write. You don't tell me what to say as a joke.
No, I understand you.
Hmm?
I understand your...
I don't need you to understand me.
Oh, of course not. That's what they all say once they get that.
I'm not there, baby. I'm not there.
All right.
I'm not
okay.
there.
Okay. First of all, I know. There are other things I just want to end this.
And at the end of that, we kind of, looked at it and said, okay. And I briefly talked to Michael St. John afterwards, and he was like, screw him, and I didn't like what he said, and I still don't like what he said. So, but whether they ever got together and apologized or whatever, made things right, who knows? But it was just an interesting time because it happens not often in today's world, and a lot of times you don't even get news conferences now, because what happens is the artist, they make an announcement on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram, and you don't have that interaction of a real live news conference where they make these announcements and you get to be there with them, and this kind of thing comes up. But that's what it is. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll have another story for you tomorrow.